Hey yo, I gave an explanation of a design for a scramjet rocket. So it's kind of hard to verbalize things sometimes. So this is kind of like, and I apologize for my crappy drawing. It's early in the morning, and I just wanted to make sure that I explained a little bit better with a diagram of what I was talking about, and I think it'll make a lot more sense to you. Essentially, okay, in a turbojet afterburner, what you have is you have your compressor stage, your combustion chamber, and your turbo stage. And then after that, you inject additional fuel, ignite it, and you have your afterburner, which is kind of like a scramjet. In a scramjet, according to what I'm seeing and what I understand, this cone part does the part of this. The problem is that you have to get the velocity up to where the air coming in gets compressed, and you have this effect without any of this. The problem is that you need a rocket stage to be able to get the velocity out of this so that you can inject the fuel. Sorry, my cat. So you can inject the fuel and have the combustion and have it go at the speed. So in other words, it's imitating this with this by using mechanically compressing it. So my idea was this, and I don't know if it's possible to do this, but is it possible to have a cylindrical rocket, to have the, the solid rocket propellant in a cylindrical design? So the idea would be the solid rocket propellant would burn through here as a cylinder, and additionally, if you really wanted to get complicated, you could have it in stages. So essentially, the solid rocket propellant in a cylindrical pattern would fire. The one thing I don't know is that if it would burn, if it would burn correctly, or if you'd get like some kind of weird vector thrusting as the propellant like goes from one side to the other and stuff. So that's the only thing I don't know, and I don't know if this would actually work, but I don't see why it wouldn't. And additionally, you could add stages. You see these little lines here? That would be a stage. Same thing with the center part would also be a solid rocket propellant. So this would also have solid rocket propellant. Ideally, once this reaches a certain point where you know that the maximum thrust is achieved to make this work, this guy's ignited. Now you could do that for simplicity of design, just have a fuse where you know it's going to work and then have it ignite this guy. Or conversely, uh, once you know what speed you need to achieve, you could actually have both of them work in stages. And the idea again would be simplicity of design. This would not work for an aircraft, obviously, but for self-guided munition or some kind of hypersonic rocket, I think that it would work very well. So you'd have the tube, and then you could also extend this so that they both burn at the same rate, and at a certain point you'd have them both detach. So you'd have this solid rocket propellant in the middle, and you'd have this outer shell as well, both detach at a certain point, then continue to burn, detach at a certain point, and then the final stage would be the remainder of the propellant in the cylindrical as well as the scramjet itself. Inside here you'd have solid rocket propellant pushing, and I think that that would give you the same effect. At least I'm assuming it would. I'm not 100% sure. So I don't know if this design would work or just to keep it simple and do it like this. And again, you'd have to, I'm thinking for sake of ease, instead of using any kind of electronics in here, just use a fuse at a certain point to ignite this guy, and then you'd have this guy ignited, and these guys would still be burning, so you'd have still thrust generated from this part and from this part, and you'd have your compression here, and that would eliminate this rocket stage because the whole thing would be a rocket stage. In a self-guiding munition or a hypersonic missile, you'd still have unspent fuel here and unspent fuel here that would act as a kinetic. And in other words, once it hits a target, this unspent fuel could be used also to increase the yield of this thing. So again, If you take it to another level, you could put it in a tube, much like, let's say, a shell, and use a charge back here to ignite. You'd have a sabot around the solid rocket scramjet, and of course, the longer you make this tube, the more velocity you'll get coming out of here. And then once it comes out to a certain point, like kind of like with your javelins and all your other NLAWs and stuff like that, the charge would push the rocket out at a certain velocity, and then you'd ignite the cylindrical rocket. And if it's possible to ignite this rocket, so you'd have two rockets igniting, one inside, one outside on the shell. They'd burn both, and then at a certain point, both of them would run out of fuel. You'd have a system where it would just detach this, so an explosive charge here to detach this part, continue to burn. Second stage, this part would detach, and then you just have the scramjet part with the rocket still burning on the outside as well. So I think that something like this would work. I considered building something out of a D-class rocket. The problem is the duration's not going to work. So I don't have the licensing, and I don't want to get in trouble with whatever organization is the one that that regulates these things, to build something like this. But if somebody does have the license to be able to build beyond D-class rockets, I live in the Orlando area, and I'm always up for collaborating on crazy stuff. I'm kind of like a savant when it comes to building mechanical things. I didn't go to school, so I can't do the math to find out how long it would take and whatever. But I'm sure that it wouldn't be difficult to do the math to find out at what point this would work, where you ignite this guy. And again, for simplicity of design, you wouldn't need a rocket stage. The thing itself would be a rocket stage. And if you wanted to go a little bit faster and ditch these parts as you're achieving the speed, and then just go with this last part to go into a hypersonic flight. Again, if you wanted to go even faster or more efficiently, you could use a small charge with a sabot. A sabot basically would be a piece of plastic or something around this, and it would fire and launch this guy at a certain velocity. The longer you make this tube, kind of like with a gun barrel, the longer you make this tube, the more velocity will be achieved by the charge and the sabot. And then once it exits here at a certain predetermined speed and whatnot, the rocket engines will fire. You'd have your different stages, and then finally you'd have this thing. And again, you'd still have a lot of unspent fuel here and here to achieve hypersonic flight. And if this was a warhead, again, you'd have the unspent fuel here that would add to the kinetic energy of the rocket if it's used in that method. But again, this is kind of like what I had in my head. I apologize for my crappy drawings. I don't know if this would work, but this is what I was speaking of. As soon as I saw this thing, it kind of reminded me of the Hawley carburetors, the annular style boosters and stuff. So I kind of mechanically, I understand what they're going for. So this is my idea of what I would do. So I hope that this makes a lot more sense. And again, I live in the Orlando area, and if anybody wants to collaborate on this and has the licensing to be able to build something like this, because the problem is you have different stages. The duration of the rocket would have to be much more than, let's say, a hobbyist. So you'd have to have a license to be able to fly this thing. And again, wouldn't work in an aircraft, but I think that this would work extremely well for some guided munitions and stuff. I mean, it's basically a dumb bomb. Of course, you could add some fins on here and stuff and have some electronics to guide it to a target. But again, this was my design, and I don't know if a cylindrical rocket will work again, because I don't know if it'll burn evenly or cause vectoring. As you know, this side burns faster than this side. You might have a vector down this way. So I don't know. But this is what I was talking about. So I hope that this kind of clears it up. I'm sorry for the word vomit I gave you. It's just I was writing and visualizing this at the same time, so the design kind of changed in my head mid paragraph. So Anyways, this is what I was talking about. So I don't know if this would work. And again, if anybody wants to build it and give it a shot, more than happy to. And I live in the Orlando area again. So anybody that has a license to launch one of these things and just give it a try, see if it works, just let me know. All right, peace.